Hey guys, welcome back. This is Dental Unfiltered. I'm here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo, and we have a subject that's pretty awesome. It's a subject that I get asked questions about all the time, and it's effective office managers setting goals, quarterly meetings, and bonus structures. The OM position is a high question, high stress area, and Dr. Vallo somehow has really created a great structure of doing this. And I'm really curious. This is a place where like everyone's like, how do I find the right office manager? And my opinion is, it's not finding the right office manager. It's, are you the right leader to pull the most opportunity out of that office manager? And part of it is the things you're talking about. We're going to talk about was setting goals, quarterly meetings, and bonus structures. Those things are the things that make people rise, and then you being a leader motivates them.
I hate to
But
interject, Matt, but I think it is also finding the right office manager because
well, yeah, there's part of it, but I think the wrong doc can find the right office manager and not have these structures in place
yeah,
and not get the
no, you're
potential
right.
out of them. Like
It's
there's
it's
certain things like you need the right person,
it's a two-sided coin for sure.
but it is, but I think a lot of it is this. So
Yeah.
when you're going through it, how did you come up with your bonus structure? What was your thinking and your methodology for like, how am I going to bonus these people? How am I going to set their goals? What's the starting point? Because that's the hardest part for a dog. Where do I start?
Yeah, so we're gonna get to all that, guys. Honestly, I think this is gonna be a super helpful episode for any of you guys, whether you currently do or don't have office managers. Where I actually want to start today's episode, though, is when do you know it's the right time for an office manager? When do you know that you need an office manager? And so here's my thought on this, guys. If you're doing a startup, it's your first startup, you're going to be there full time. You've got a small team. Hopefully, you've got a full time hygienist. I highly recommend it. Couple dental assistants, probably one front office personnel, yourself. At that point in time, you're the dentist, you're the business owner, entrepreneur. You're also wearing the hat kind of the office manager. It's at that point, it doesn't really make sense to have an office manager for a brand new startup when you're there full time and you're just kind of building from the ground up. And that's what I did. When I opened my first startup, and I don't have any regrets about the way I did it. No office manager. I essentially was the office manager. So I was the one who, and I'm not going to say I did a great job with all of it at that time, but I was the one who handled all the HR stuff, got the text from the employees when they needed to call off, handled people that, needed to be reprimanded or even terminated from their employment, made sure that all the different functionalities of the office were running appropriately, put out, day-to-day fires within the office. So that was all me. And again, I think startup office, or even if you acquire a smaller office, that's the way to start. Now, eventually, as things start to grow, the practice gets a little bit bigger. You add a second hygienist, maybe a third hygienist, you add another dental assistant, you maybe even consider adding an associate or even a part time associate. Things are getting bigger, there's more going on. That's the time where I think it makes sense to bring in an office manager. And that was about the time I brought in our first office manager, was right around the time that we added our third hygienist, brought in an associate dentist, that type of a thing. And that was super helpful for me because honestly, at the end of the day, while I feel like I am a strong entrepreneur, and I feel like my leadership skills have gotten better, I definitely wasn't the best office manager for the practice, especially because I was also wearing the hats of dentist and business owner. But I think that's kind of what you have to do. Now, if you're getting to one of these points and you're kind of questioning, is it the right time for me? Do I really need one? Can I afford one? All that stuff. My first point to you would be like, hey, are you actually going to let this person come in and are you going to empower them to be a manager within your practice? Because if not, don't spend the money, don't waste the money on bringing in an office manager if you're just essentially going to be still the manager and micromanaging them every step of the way. So this person, if you're bringing them into your practice, they should be taking responsibilities off your plate so you can focus more on the dentistry, more on the business owner side of things, and less on the day-to-day management. So I think that's kind of the starting point there. I don't have a set number for you guys. Everyone's practices are different. Everybody's overhead's different. In my mind, I've always hired today for the practice I want tomorrow. So, I'm probably a little quicker to jump the gun. And again, this was just my first practice. So every subsequent practice that I've opened, number two, number three, number four, And then the new ones that I'm preparing to open here shortly, number 5, number 6, number 7, they are all going to have an office manager from the very start. So, as if you're growing a dental group, you're growing multiple practices. If you are not going to be the dentist in that practice every day or pretty much every day, you do need somebody who's there full time to manage a practice, run the day to day. And I'll tell you, for me, it's that much more helpful. We will actually bring in the office managers before these new practices open. So we will, like right now, I've got two of them that we've already hired that we're essentially kind of paying hourly right now to help with some of the interviewing for other positions, to help, get things set up for the practices. And then as we get a little bit closer to opening, we're going to bring them on full time. They're going to do, training at our other locations so they can really learn and immerse themselves in our different systems and policies and get a feel for the practice. And then they're going to kind of help run the team training as we bring in the rest of the team to prepare to open those practices. So,
Part of it is, like you said, it's really important. Is docs always get stuck in this like chicken or an egg scenario where it's like I think this happens a lot with associates and with managers. It's like, well, when I get here, that's when I need it, but you need it before you get there to be there. So it's kind of like I hate the saying, right? People say like I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
yeah,
My feeling is there's no gonna be no bridge there to cross because you didn't build it. Like you got to
right,
build the bridge to cross, right? And one thing you are good at is you are always like you're always building for the practice you want, not the
right.
practice you have, right?
Yep,
I think docs get very like I think part of it is they don't want their personal income to shift based on overhead, right? So well, how do I maintain my income and add people? I have to do this, but it's physically impossible for your hands to do enough work to get there the way you're set up right now. You need that person to augment you so you can do more. Because if you're working in the business and you're working on the business and you're doing all the dentistry all the time, like how are you actually going to get to that growth point? So I
right,
think part of it is you guys have to be sensitive to like, yeah, your overhead's going to go up, your margins are going to get tight for a period. As we've scaled my company, Energize, from 4 years ago, what 3 employees back when you started working with us, to like 55 now. Like there was time periods that I had to hire to maintain customer service for
right.
our accounts, right? Like you have to build the bridge before you cross it.
No, I think that makes total sense. And I think once again, guys, like if you're doing a multi location, I've had people ask me too, like, I can barely manage my one office. Like, how do you manage 4 or 5 or, whatever it is? And it's because I have tried to remove myself as much as possible from the normal workings of the practice. So, like, I bring in office managers that essentially replace myself, or would replace you as the practice owner. So these docs that are saying I can barely manage my own practice, how do you manage all these? Well, oftentimes they don't have an office manager, or they have one by name, but they're not really truly an office manager. Again, they're an additional front office personnel, but the doctor is still the one in charge of most of the decisions. They're still the one putting out most of the fires, all that stuff. So at this point in time, guys, like I have very little involvement in the day to day of most of my practices, actually becoming all of my practices. I have very little, I actually go to the practices not very often. So they're kind of now self sufficient dental practices that are run with the internal teams that are there. And, now we've got an operations officer that kind of checks into. So I've even removed myself another layer there. Likely next year, we'll bring in a regional manager. So we'll have office manager, regional manager, operations officer, CFO, myself. So I think the more layers of separation you can create, the easier it is for you to focus on the things you really have to focus on, like the growth of the group, like the big picture systems and changes we want to. We're bringing in Overjet AI software, so we're going to be adding that to all of our
Oh, are
general
you
dental
picking up
boutique
Overjet?
practices. Yep,
Overjet's so cool.
we were going with Overjet. So like those are like the things that I focus on the day to day. And it's not always me doing all the demos and things like that, but like those are the big picture company wide decisions and processes that I'm working on, scouting out new locations, making sure that we're getting everything set up. But then even again with one of our new locations is in Southeast Florida. It's 4 hours away. This is going to be our first distant practice from the rest of our group, but we've already hired a great office manager down there, and she's going to handle most of the physical, setup that needs to happen to get things ready. Now it's again, it's a existing dental practice space that we're buying, no patients, but it's already got the equipment. It already looks nice, so there is very little we have to do from that perspective prepare. But there's I mean, we got to get our signage up there, so she's got to meet with a signage company and get them information they need and all that good stuff. So I would never have bought that practice if I wasn't planning to find and put in a great office manager ahead of time to get things set up for me, because I would never in a million years have time to drive 4 hours each way, or even take flights down there to, that area, Fort Lauderdale area, every week to get things set up. So,
So getting back to the subject, right?
yep.
So we've talked a lot about the importance of finding the office manager,
Yep.
being prepared ahead of time, that
Yep.
kind of stuff. But like, so I'm a doc and I call you and say, hey, I'm getting my first office manager. It's time to start setting goals. What advice do you give him on the goal setting part? And then how do you structure your quarterly meetings?
So before we even get into that, I want to get into how you find great office
Cool.
managers. So, first of all, we use Indeed mostly. I still think that's the best place to hire. We use that almost exclusively for our different positions. I am looking for somebody that has leadership management experience. Ideally, they have some kind of formal business education. It doesn't always matter. But what I've realized over the years is, unfortunately, a lot of the people out there with dental office management experience, they don't really have the leadership management background, either from, just real life or from, the educational standpoint. They were great dental assistants, great front office personnel that essentially got elevated into the role of office manager. And maybe they've got 5 years of office manager experience, but like that alone doesn't mean that they're a great leader or a great manager. So it honestly almost takes a certain kind of personality to be a strong leader. You can be a great implementer, you can be very intelligent, but it still is like a different skill set to be able to lead people, to hold people accountable in a way that doesn't come off, as like dictatorial. So, I've realized early on, having some office managers that didn't work out, that were exactly this. They had been dental front office, for 15 years. Eventually, they just got elevated in the position of office manager, and they did however many years at that. And then I hired them, and I realized, like, okay, they know dental insurance. They know how to check patients in and out. They know what an MODB is, but they don't really know how to lead people. They don't know how to bring up the energy in the culture. They don't know how to hold people accountable when they're not carrying their weight. They let problems brew, they're not proactive with them. And so we went through a couple office managers early on that just really weren't great fits, but they all had lots of dental experience. So what I have since realized is, like, yes, it's great to get somebody with dental experience, but that is something you can teach. And honestly, if they're a pretty intelligent person, while it can be a steep learning curve, I've learned recently that people can learn dental fairly quickly, at least to the extent where they can, manage an office. I am honestly more concerned with what type of management leadership experience do they have? Do they have some outside dental? Because I honestly think the bar is set a lot higher in a lot of other fields for managers, leaders than it is within dental. And then, do they have any formal business training, education? That's helpful too. So I brought in a couple great team members, including our operations officer, who had no dental experience and, has basically self-trained themselves. And are they 100% experts at this point? No, but they know enough to do their job, and they come with experience like bank manager, customer service experience, things like that. And so they're able to handle patient situations and de-escalate them and turn bad, patient experiences into good opportunities, and they're able to lead and manage team members and hold them accountable and get the most out of them. So to me, that is way more important. When I run these Indeed ads, I ask questions like, what type of management experience do you have? So if there's things not on their resume, we can find it. How comfortable are you having difficult conversations with employees? what would you do in this scenario? One of your employees shows up late, for the second time in 2 weeks. What's your approach? What steps do you take? Things like that. So I'm basically like doing these pre-screening questions on Indeed to try to weed out people that I don't think are going to be great fits as leaders within our organization. And then once we actually find some great candidates, the interview process starts. And typically, my operations manager right now is doing the initial round interviews, and then second round interviews typically happen in person at one of our practices. I mean, not usually the practice that they're going to, because often it's a new practice, but one of the other practices they'll do an in-person interview with that office manager, and they'll meet the team there, and they'll get a feel for the practice, and we'll get a feel for them in person. And then third round interviews typically happen with our CFO, who's my father, who has, 35, 40 years of banking experience as a, executive within a bank, and he's done plenty of this stuff. So it's gone through a number of different people before I typically, at this point, they typically send me one candidate. They're usually like, this is our top candidate. We just want you to do a final interview. I'll do the final interview, because it's to me, it's a key personnel and I do want to talk to them before we, hire them on. By the time I do that interview, it's usually like, hey, they've sent me this amazing person who's a great fit for the role. And usually I offer them a job later that day. So that's kind of our process. Now, again, you don't have a big group, you don't have a big team, you don't have all these different people that can go through the interview process, and that's totally fine. And maybe it's at this point you have to do the initial round interviews, and then as you find some good candidates, you bring them in the office. Another option is you could do the pre-screening. Find a handful of people that look good on paper, and then bring them in the office to meet with your other team members, get a feel for them, and then based on their feedback, decide who you want to do more formal interviews with. So there's a couple different ways you can do it based on the size of your organization. But again, just to kind of sum up this whole section, guys, yes, dental can be very helpful, especially if you've got a small office and you don't have a ton of people that are strong with dental insurance and things like that. However, in my mind, dental can be taught. Sometimes those leadership management skills and experience cannot be. So just make sure if you're going to bring in somebody that they have what it takes to really lead, get the most out of your team, and hold them accountable.
So
And then I would not hire too fast for this position. So if you have one interview and it's just you with an office manager and you're like, oh, this person sounds great, don't just hire them on the spot. At the very least, bring them into your office so they can meet the team, get some feedback from your team. If you don't have an office manager currently, and this is your first one you're interviewing for, maybe have your hygienist interview them. Maybe have one of your dental assistants interview them. But I do think it's helped. Maybe even have your spouse interview them. Like I think it's good to have multiple perspectives, on a potential candidate before you make that offer. Again, especially a position so important as office managers, because as good as great office managers can be for your office and your culture and your morale, bad office managers, bad leaders can also have an even more negative effect. I cannot tell you how many offices I've seen like half of the team members jump ship because of an office manager that just wasn't a servant leader. They led more with that dictator style and they just drove their team away. So really, really important you find someone that's a good fit for your practice.
so you're really prioritizing in the interview process. Dental knowledge is important, but if you have management skills and the human
Yep.
skills to lead
Yep.
others, that's priority one. Dental's priority two, which I
Yep.
think culturally, I talk to dentists all day long. They flip flop that. And they go, this person has 30 years. The first thing they say to me is, hey, I got a new manager. She's awesome. She has 30 years dental experience. Is the first
Yep.
thing they say.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I think it should be flip flop. I think the leadership skills, they can be taught, but they're harder.
Yep.
I think dental knowledge, I mean, as I started 5 years ago in dental, I think I have pretty high dental IQ now. Like, I think dental knowledge can be taught. Like, we
Yeah.
here at our company, we have dental knowledge hours that all of our account managers, all of our employees have to go to with Samantha, our 20-year office manager, and she teaches our team dental. So that way our team can talk intelligently. That you can transfer that information, developing the skill. Like, one is a value of information, the other is a skill. And teaching and developing and honing and sharpening the skill of being an awesome leader that can handle this is a much longer, harder process than transferring dental knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, anyways, I'm going to get off that soapbox now. I just wanted to give you
Yeah.
guys lesson that I have learned the hard way over the years, but at this point, we have much more success with the office managers that we bring in. The other thing, or the next thing I want to get into is how you kind of set goals, set bonuses, have, quarterly meetings that we do. So I guess first of all, pay structure, everyone wants to know about that. What I'm going to say, I guess, about base pay is we pay a competitive base pay range for our area for office managers. So, you if you want to attract top talent, you have to pay competitively. There are definitely offices out there that pay higher base pay than we do, but we do try to be in the competitive range for our area. And then again, it is somewhat based on experience, how much leadership management experience they have, how much dental experience do they have. And they're going to fall somewhere in that range that we set. But the other things we do is I do add an annual retention bonus. So for our key personnel, it's like I want to keep them around. I want to have them grow with the company. So, there is a retention bonus at the end of, the year. So if they're having a rough week or whatever it is, it's just something little added to kind of help keep them motivated, on task, to stick with it, to have that grit, knowing that, there is kind of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if they can at least make it through that period. Because the thing is, tough times don't last. So I think a lot of times when you have employees that make the decision that they're going to leave you, it's because they're having a rough week. It's not because things have been bad for 6 months or whatever it is. People can make those split decisions. They see another job post out there, whatever. So I do believe in retention bonuses for some of our key personnel. Usually the retention bonus is a few $1,000s to $5,000. So it's nothing crazy, but it is a nice end of year bonus that does kind of keep people motivated, especially as they get towards the end of that year. But I think the most effective thing that we do for our office managers is they get a quarterly bonus as well. So they have the opportunity to earn a quarterly bonus. It's the same for all of our office managers. It's 2,500 a quarter. And so there's 4 quarters in a year. They can earn $10,000 in bonuses if they perform well over the course of the year. And the way those bonuses are split, half of the 2,500 bonus is based on our KPI goals, mainly collections, production, but sometimes we have other KPIs that we include as well. Usually I'll cap it at 3. So usually it's collections, productions, and maybe one more thing. Sometimes it's something as simple as like number of Google reviews or something. The other half of their bonus is based on more intangibles, how I feel like they're doing as a manager, if I've given them different projects to take on, how those projects are going, have they started them, have they completed them, things like that. So every quarter, so January 1st through March 30th or March 31st is the first quarter of the year. Sometime in early to mid-April, we'll have a quarterly meeting. We'll talk about how everything went that first quarter. I typically do these meetings now on Zoom with our different office managers. So we'll talk about how everything went for them in their office that first quarter. We'll go through basically their, I've got like a couple pages of notes from that last meeting with their different goals and things we're working on and all that stuff. So we'll go line by line. How did this go? We'll talk about it. How did that go? I'll present them with their actual KPIs from the quarter. We'll talk about if they're getting their full bonus or partial bonus, or whatever it is. And then we'll set goals for the next quarter. And again, in addition to the KPIs, goals can be things like, hey, we just implemented this new software that does voicemail drops. So basically, we can send out text messages to new patients and they get a voicemail essentially dropped to their phone from the doctor. So one of your projects this quarter is to have the doctor record, this greeting to welcome the patient to the practice and to get that system implemented where at least 24 hours before every new patient appointment, they're getting a voicemail from the doctor. So it can be different things like that we're kind of adding the practice, taking on the practice. It could be something like, hey, the hygiene department, has been struggling a little bit with their efficiency and their KPIs. One of your projects is I want you to work closely with the hygiene department. I want you to have, meetings at least once a month with the hygiene department to go over their KPIs, improvement in the KPIs. We brought in a hygiene consultant recently. She used to be the chief hygiene officer for a DSO that had over 100 practices. So she was a hygienist, went into kind of consulting role, Now she's working with us. And so, one of my office managers, the goal is to work closely with her and to try to hit some, improvement with some of these hygiene metrics at one of our offices. So that's kind of the gist of how these meetings go. I also open the floor to the office managers for any feedback they have, any concerns they have, any ideas they have for improvement. And then, I essentially thank them for another great quarter and we kind of move on. I will tell you guys, my goal is for these office managers to hit their bonuses each quarter. So I try to set realistic goals that I believe that they're going to be able to hit. And that's my goal. I want to pay out their full 2,500 quarterly bonus every quarter to them. If they're not hitting their bonuses, frequently, we've got bigger issues that we've got to work on. So
So you set the goal and you guys kind of attack it as a team, and you have the meetings to update the goals and track it. Have you had an experience where there was someone who you thought was like, this is what this person's a home run, and then through these meetings in time, they just weren't hitting their goals because they couldn't keep their eye on the ball. And then how did you like get them back on target? It's like that's a big struggle for Dennis. Like,
yeah,
hope no one gets offended by this, but generally navigating the human train is hard for Dennis in these scenarios, right? So it's like they hire this person, they thought they were awesome, they're trapped in this marriage with an office manager. They've done the right things, they've had the quarterly meetings, they set up the bonus structures, they've set the targets, they've shot the targets, they've missed the targets. Now, what is the conversation you have with that individual like? How do you
yeah.
pull them back in and bring them to the level they need to be at?
Well, and Matt, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the two-sided coin. So we have not recently had any of those major issues with office managers. The ones I had in the past, at that point in time, my we didn't have these structured quarterly meetings. So we would meet, but it was more informal. I wouldn't have all these prepared notes for them. I wouldn't have all these written out set goals for them. We basically we I did do quarterly bonuses, but they were just based on metrics. So it was either like the office performed and they got it or it didn't and they didn't. And sometimes honestly, the office performed, but it wasn't because of the job the office manager was doing. It was in spite of what the office manager was doing. And so like there were times I was paying out these bonuses and like deep down I'm thinking like, man, I don't really feel like this person is performing to the point where they should be getting bonus right now. And as I started realizing that, that's when I started realizing like, hey, maybe we've got bigger problems here. So I think part of it is me growing as a leader and CEO of our group and figuring out how important these meetings and clear written expectations were and clear written goals. Um, and part of it was starting to look for and hire managers for the right reasons with the right type of experience. So I think we've found better leaders, but I think I've also created better systems to hold them accountable and motivate them and set those clear expectations. So,
Well, guys, let's wrap this up here. Hey, guys, it was a great episode. This is a subject that gets talked about in every Facebook group. I hear about it probably once a day. Docs are struggling with this thing, and I think it's really good insights from Dr. Val of how he's done it. It's a hard subject because your office manager is like the extension of Doc on the business side, and it's tough. So, hey, guys, please click like, subscribe, and please share. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
thanks, guys.